Ah, yes. Deadliest Warrior. Anyone remember this show? No? Oh. Well, the idea behind the show was to put one warrior against another to find out which one would win in combat. For example, Spartan versus Ninja, a knight versus a pirate, or the Yakuza versus the Mafia. The concept alone was pretty cool, except for one thing. The show was an hour long, consisting of 85% filler, while the last 3 minutes of the show featured the two warriors fighting. You may learn some history and neat things about the warriors here and there, but the testing of the weapons and armor are usually done so in hilarious and very unrealistic fashion. But we aren't here to talk about the show. We'll save that for another time, maybe. What we'll be taking a look at today is Deadliest Warrior, the game, released for Xbox Live Arcade and PSN back in 2010. Now, there is a physical copy of this game, which is what I'm using for this review, that has not only Deadliest Warrior the game, but also its sequel, Deadliest Warrior Legends. It was released a few years later and titled Deadliest Warrior Ancient Combat. Now, the pros to buying this compilation disc is that you get all the DLC characters, bonus weapons, a new level, and various other additional content. So with all that said, let's see what Deadliest Warrior the game is really all about. The first thing we should discuss is the game modes. Well, there is no story mode for the game, but we do have arcade, practice, challenge, and battle. Arcade can be easily beaten with any single character in about 10 to 15 minutes. Of course, this is an incredibly short amount of time. However, Deadliest Warrior is not the only game that has a short arcade mode. Virtua Fighter, which is one of my favorites, also has an arcade mode that can be beaten in roughly the same amount of time. The practice mode is self-explanatory. Battle is just a single fight between you and the computer, but challenge is something a little bit different. Challenge mode is unlocked once you beat arcade with all of the characters. What challenge consists of is survival mode, slice mode, target, and survival slice. The slice modes are essentially just sudden death, where most hits from your weapon will take off limbs. And the only other mode of note is target. This mode was taken straight from arcade. For some reason, the developers thought that this little minigame was just so damn good that they should make it into a separate mode on the challenge menu. Well, they were wrong. It's incredibly boring and pointless, really. But as a whole, there is a decent amount of game modes to choose from, including 2 different types of local multiplayer, as well as an online multiplayer. However, don't expect to find anyone to play against online. It's just not gonna happen. Graphically, it's fine. It's not amazing by any means, but hey, this isn't a big budget game, so it's really not worth complaining about. There is some screen tearing and nasty frame rate drops that happen on occasion, which can be annoying, but thankfully, it's nowhere near as bad as some of the other games I've played. That being said, there are times where the voice work doesn't sync up with the characters' mouths, in the sense that your character might be in the middle of screaming, talking, or whatever, and yet their mouths are completely shut. Normally, this sort of thing would seriously piss me off, especially if this was a AAA title with a massive budget. But in this instance, I don't know, I couldn't help myself from laughing by how bad it is. The controls are very simple, very easy to understand. A new player should be able to familiarize themselves with the controls in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes tops. You can perform low, medium, and high attacks, as well as block and use your long-range weapon. You can also swap between your close and medium range weapons with just a press of a button. You can perform a special attack when the enemy's health is low enough, which will lead into an execution. The executions are surprisingly lackluster and usually not that graphic. The developers even stated that they didn't want their executions to be over the top or exaggerated like fatalities are in Mortal Kombat. Which is fine. I mean, that's perfectly understandable. But it's very strange to say this, considering this is a very, very violent game where you can hack off fucking limbs with a tiny knife and a spear. And speaking of hacking off limbs, you can still fight with a missing arm as well as being crippled. The problem is, if you are damaged in this way, you better figure out how to end the fight as quick as possible, since you'll of course be at an extreme disadvantage. So, the developers chose to go with a more realistic combat system, meaning that it won't take you 50 strikes with your weapon to kill the enemy. The thing is, with this combat system, it makes the rounds last very short. One would argue, too short. My fights typically last anywhere from just a few seconds to 25-ish tops. Which in my opinion kind of defeats the purpose of having a time counter at the top, because realistically, I can't imagine anyone having a round last longer than 30 seconds unless they are intentionally fucking around. Bushido Blade is also kind of like this in the sense that the battles tend to be very short, so I guess if you like Bushido Blade's combat, you might like this. I don't know. You have a total of 11 characters to choose from, such as the Pirate, Ninja, Centurion, and a Rajput Warrior. Each character has a small arsenal of weapons they bring to the battlefield, and you can unlock more weapons and armor by playing through the arcade mode with the character of your choosing. Some of the characters can take more damage than others, like the Knight, Spartan, or Rajput Warrior due to the armor, while others like the Ninja, Shaolin Monk, and Pirate can be easily killed in just one single combo. Of course, the major trade-off here is that the Ninja and Monk's attacks are much quicker than the Knight or Spartan. And the thing is, since I beat the game with all of the characters, I wasn't really feeling like any of them felt overpowered or anything. To me, they all felt balanced enough to where if I play as a monk, I wouldn't feel like I was at a major disadvantage against a heavily armed opponent like the Spartan or the Knight. Unfortunately, that's really all I have to say about this game without going on and on to the point of rambling. So that means we're gonna head to my final thoughts. As a whole, this game is fun, and not something you should take all that seriously. In fact, the best way that you could play this game is to have a group of friends come over for game night or whatever. Maybe drink a few beers or shots and just enjoy yourselves. This isn't a game that's really all that fun to play by yourself. You might get some enjoyment out of it for the first hour or so, but the novelty tends to wear off pretty quick. I guess a lot of people would consider this to be a bad game, but me, no, not so much. The game is perfectly playable. It may lack in replay value, but I couldn't ever call this necessarily a bad game. Shaq Fu is a bad fighting game. Balls 3D is also very bad. Rise of the Robots is horrendous, maybe even the worst fighter of all time, but Deadliest Warrior, it's just kind of mediocre, I guess. So that's Deadliest Warrior, the video game. In the future, I do plan to review the sequel, but for now, this is all the Deadliest Warrior I can handle on such a short period of time. Until next time, everyone, thank you all very much for watching, and take care.